Alright, now we've kind of disassembled everything here. This is your main money makers you're looking at when it comes to these dryers. A couple things in mind to keep is the older the dryer, generally the better the dryer. It's back when they used a lot of American steel, heavier cast products. This is an old General Electric from years ago. Your main money maker is going to be the motor you guys see me pull out. This is the housing on the motor here. This is all cast aluminum. It's worth cutting off of the steel here. Get you a couple extra pounds of just solid cast aluminum. You do want to make sure you get the metal bearings out from in here, as a lot of scrap yards will give you either cheaper prices or will not accept them as aluminum. So make sure you get those bearings out, and they're obviously steel. These little fin bays around here are all aluminum. If you really want to get your money, you can cut them off. For me personally, they're not worth it, so I just leave them attached and I throw them in the scrap steel pile. One of the things before my camera died, you guys didn't get to see me pull the wire out of here. Now that wire that I pulled out was all copper coated aluminum. Unfortunately, some of these motors are aluminum, some of them are copper. The copper ones are obviously worth a little bit more. Once you get your cut all the way around and get your top pried off, it's not very hard at all to take a flathead screwdriver, peel it in there, and just pop them out. They're generally pretty easy to come out. And then this is just another chunk of steel. One of the things you guys also didn't really get to see me do too much was rip all the wire out of the main control panel and board here. This is kind of a quick and dirty way to scrap these. Obviously you can go much more in depth and get every little bit that you can. You got all these brass plugs here, all these little prongs sticking out. You can sit there and cut every single one of those off. For me, it's just not worth it. Your wire here, your smaller gauge, my opinion, most of the time is not really worth stripping unless you got an automated stripper. I don't have one of those, maybe one day. One thing that is worth your time is to cut all these little plugs off. Most scrap places will give you more money if all the scrap plugs are clipped off. Also, the brass ones here, cut those off, put them in their own pile. You can get a 80% brass, 20% copper mixture, whatever your local scrap place does. Mine gives me 80% brass. You clip every single one of those off, throw them in a little baggie, they pile up after time. A lot of the smaller gauge stuff, especially if it's aluminum wire, is really not worth stripping. And like I said, unless you got an automatic stripper. So that's all your wire there. Careful with this stuff. You'll see this stuff, it's got a kind of intertwined fiberglass type look to it. Yeah. Careful with it. If you do try to strip it, it tends to go everywhere, and it's it makes an awful mess. I learned my lesson after stripping a little bit of it. You only get aluminum wire out of it. They don't put copper inside these 9 times out of 10, and it's just not worth it. It makes a hell of a mess, so I recommend not stripping those whatsoever. Then you got your money maker here. On average, most of these are between a pound to upwards of 3 pounds worth of copper that you can strip out of these. A lot of the times, they're so beat up on the ends that you can just get a little cut going and you can just peel the copper out. You don't have to sit there with a razor blade all day long. Again, cut those off so you make sure you get your higher price end. Cut your prongs off. Some places will take just this plug the way it is. They'll give you like 8 cents a pound. And if you're doing this a lot, they pile up. So this one right here, this heavy gauge, is definitely worth scrapping. A lot of the newer dryers will not have one of these light bulbs, but if they do, please be careful when you're trying to take one of these out. You do not want these to blow up in your face. You do not want them to break and get everywhere. I mean, you don't want to break anything glass and get it anywhere, especially these bolts. Now, some other things that came out of the motherboard there is these little motors here. The little, transformers, little transformers here. These have a tiny little bit of copper in them. To some people they might be worth scrapping, some people maybe not. This is what the wire kind of looks like. I cut some of it with the grinder over there, and it comes out pretty easily. Me personally, sometimes I scrap them, sometimes I'll cut them up, get the copper out and just kind of throw them in there just like that. You'll get a number 2 copper price for it if you take the tape and the crap off of it, so not bad. I'll most likely end up cutting this one up and adding it to the pile. So there's your copper there. Another thing I like to do, all your screws that you do end up taking out that you don't cut off, make sure you put them in a little bowl. You're going to end up with screws all over your yard, and that's how you get some nice flat tires. So you got your cast aluminum there. All this is cast. Here is the wire that came out of the motor. Now, looking at it, you're going to see that, you know, nice bright orange copper color. You scratch it a little bit or you cut it, you get that aluminum. It's all just aluminum. You know, you're going to get, depending on your scrapyard, you can get anywhere from 20 to 30 cents a pound on average. It's really not worth all that much, but when you're doing this a lot and you're just sitting there cutting it and you're not prying it all apart, it makes it worth it. Especially if you're picking these things up for free like I do. Nope. Apparently my video cut off there, my bad. It's worth it to just cut these open with a grinder wheel if you have access to them. If you don't, then you're going to sit there and you're going to unbolt every little thing. Takes more time. Still, at the end of the day, it might be worth it, but it is going to take you more time. In total, non-stop working, it's only going to take you about 10 to 30 minutes max to completely rip everything there is out of one of these dryers. Me personally, this is all I used. You got a grinder there, a drill. I tried to use the hacksaw, but it didn't work, so I just ended up using the pry bar to take that motor out. And then just, you know, some needle nose, some wire cutters, flathead screwdriver. That's it. Pretty simple tools. Obviously there's some other tools that you can get that make it a little bit easier, like a vise to take that motor apart. You know, a little bit safer, I guess would be the proper terms. Anyways, that's the dryer. It's going to stay up on this trailer and go to scrap metal. All this is going to go in the office and get stripped apart. That old refrigerator right there is going to be next. See you guys for that video.